So, welcome to week one of our course on forced and precarious labour in the global economy. One of the main goals of this week is to take you through some of the consequences and effects of different schemes for classifying labour exploitation and vulnerability. So in this week, we want to think about how the ways in which we classify different practices has various effects in terms of politics and in terms of what gets defined as a problem and what gets defined as normal and unremarkable and perhaps even desirable. So in this session, I'm really interested in thinking through the limitations and complications associated with the most popular way of describing labor exploitation in the world today, and that is the categories and campaigns associated with human trafficking and modern slavery. So these are extremely popular. They're very difficult to avoid, yet their popularity isn't necessarily a good sign of whether they're useful or effective. So in thinking about them, the main thing I want to emphasize is the problems which arise when you try and draw a hard and fast and firm distinction between exceptional cases, which are commonly classified in terms of modern-day slavery and human trafficking, and everyday and unremarkable patterns of work and labor and mobility. So modern slavery, in terms of how it defines and classifies problems, invites us to think about a small number of exceptional and deviant cases, most commonly attributed to criminals. And in doing so, it tends to draw a hard line between the exceptional and the everyday. And both analytically and politically, there's real problems with seeking to uphold this distinction. So to give you a sense of what some of these problems are, I want to take you through two brief recent examples, which I hope will underscore some of the limitations of seeking to draw this hard and fast distinction between the exceptional and everyday. So the first of my examples comes in the form of Ivanka Trump, who recently gave a speech at the United Nations earlier this year where she denounced modern slavery and human trafficking as splintering families, distorting global markets, undermining the rule of law, and strengthening transnational organized criminal networks. So I'm sure it was a good speech, and I have no reason to question whether the sentiments expressed were genuine. But what is important for our purposes in this course is the fact that Ivanka Trump and other people like Ivanka Trump don't understand the cause of modern slavery and human trafficking as something that directly affects them. And this is important because Ivanka Trump, like other Trumps, sits at the head of an elaborate system of supply chains and networks which are designed to produce all kinds of goods with the Trump name. And the production of these goods, which most commonly takes place in sweatshops in places like China and Indonesia, is not understood to be part of the problem which campaigns against modern-day slavery and human trafficking are designed to combat. So, in campaigning against modern slavery and trafficking, you construct a problem which pushes to the edges of a conversation the systems whereby goods and services are produced and the ways in which patterns of vulnerability and exploitation are baked into the global economy. They're not exceptions, they're not deviations, they're part of the smooth and regular operations of the system. And there's a real problem when someone like Ivanka Trump can declare her opposition to human trafficking without having to grapple with the broader processes whereby goods bearing her name are produced. So this problem, this diagnosis between the exceptional and everyday creates all kinds of issues both politically and analytically. A second example along similar lines but with a slightly different conclusion, involves a recent campaign put together by the British government which invites citizens to spot the signs of modern slavery. So this is a public awareness campaign which is designed to get concerned citizens to look out for examples of abuse and exploitation. So as part of this campaign, the government identifies the following signs of slavery: physical or psychological abuse, isolation, poor living conditions, limited or no personal effects, restricted freedom of movement, unusual travel times, and a reluctance to seek help. So all of these, according to this campaign, are signs of slavery. The problem, however, is that they're not so much signs of an exceptional problem as symptoms of larger patterns of vulnerability and precarious living and working conditions. So all of these signs can well be signs of problems. They can illustrate vulnerability. They can point to problems and exploitation. But it's really hard to draw a clear and consistent line between the exceptional category of modern slavery and all of the everyday and unremarkable, or ostensibly unremarkable, problems that are associated with migrant workers and poor and vulnerable workers throughout the globe. So when it comes to these signs, it's really hard to say that they're signs of slavery so much as symptoms of precariety. So physical and psychological abuse, common in communities throughout the globe. Illegal migrants, whatever their working or living conditions, are going to be reluctant to seek help. This is because help too often translates into them being deported or threatened with deportation. They're also going to work according to unusual travel times, since precarious and irregular migration rarely works on a clock. If they don't speak languages or local languages or have local family or friends, they're likely to be isolated. If they move long distances, they're likely to have few or no personal effects. If you're poor, you are likely to endure poor living conditions. So in all of these cases, the signs of slavery aren't easily separated out from people at the bottom ends of labour markets, migrants seeking a better life and being exploited as a consequence of their status or visa conditions, and people throughout the globe who are simply poor and precarious. Yet the campaign against modern slavery seeks to carve out an exception rather than focusing upon the everyday and unremarkable forms of exploitation and vulnerability that are a characteristic feature of labour markets throughout the globe. So in this context, modern-day slavery and human trafficking are unlikely to be the best frame of reference. They're unlikely to be the best frame of reference because they exclude too many issues and problems that really needed to be included in the analysis. And they seek to focus interventions upon an exceptional subset of cases when what's really at issue here are the underlying reasons why people are vulnerable, exploited, and poor. And as a consequence of that, it's really a much better starting point to think in terms of the working conditions and experiences of all workers, forced and precarious, rather than seeking to focus upon an isolated subset which are understood to rise to the threshold of exceptionality associated with modern slavery and human trafficking.